The truth is simple. Most store-bought pickles aren't pickled anymore. What was once a living craft of salt water and time has turned into a controlled chemical equation sealed in glass. That crunch you hear, it's more science than tradition. Open a jar today and you'll see it colors too bright brine, too clear, and a sourness that burns instead of breathes. Behind that shine hides sodium benzoate polysorbate and stabilizers built not for flavor but for shelf life. Each label still whispers homemade, but what's inside barely remembers what that word means. Together, we'll open 5 jars that tell this story of shortcuts and 2 that still keep the faith. The goal isn't fear, but awareness. Because once you see what really lives inside these jars, you'll never look at fresh the same way again. 1. Vlasic. The color hits first too bright to be born in salt and patience. You twist the lid, and the sound feels right, that little pop of freshness we all trust. But when the jar opens, the smell doesn't carry warmth. It's sharp, almost metallic, like vinegar that forgot what it was trying to copy. Inside, the cucumbers float in liquid that's too clear, too clean. The glow under the kitchen light looks artificial, more science lab than summer garden. For decades, Vlasic was the face of American pickles. That stork on the label felt friendly familiar. The name sat beside our burgers, our sandwiches, our picnics. It used to mean real crunch, the kind that comes from a slow-living brine. But that meaning changed quietly over time. To meet supermarket demand and national distribution, Vlasic moved from natural fermentation to chemical acidification, a process that gives speed, not life. A real pickle takes days, sometimes weeks, to form its sourness naturally. Salt draws water out of the cucumber while bacteria slowly turn sugars into lactic acid. That's the living process that creates the cloudy brine we used to see. It's unpredictable, patient, and full of character. But it doesn't fit the modern production schedule, so Vlasic does it differently. They start with distilled vinegar and add preservatives like sodium benzoate to keep it stable for months. Then comes polysorbate 80, an emulsifier that helps the turmeric extract stay evenly mixed, giving that perfect yellow-green tone. In a way, everything about the jar is designed for the shelf, not the stomach. The clear liquid looks safe. The color looks trustworthy. The crunch feels engineered. What you don't see is what's missing: the tiny bubbles of fermentation, the slight cloudiness of life still working inside the sourness that deepens day by day. That living world has been sterilized, replaced by precision and control. Sodium benzoate stops microbial growth, but it also stops flavor from evolving. It's the difference between something alive and something preserved. And polysorbate 80, often used in dairy and desserts, gives the brine a consistent texture that never separates. Together, they build a product that looks flawless from every angle, even after sitting on a shelf for a year. But that perfection comes at a cost. The flavor is uniform but shallow. The sourness feels one note, missing the natural tang that used to dance on the tongue. For some, that's fine predictability brings comfort. But for others, especially those who remember how pickles once tasted, something feels hollow. It's the taste of memory filtered through efficiency. When you look at the jar long enough, it almost tells its own story, a company that traded time for control, flavor for consistency, and imperfection for safety. None of those choices are illegal, and maybe not even unethical, just inevitable in a system that values quantity and convenience above all else. But they remind us how easy it is to confuse clean with pure. If you've ever compared a supermarket Vlasic spear to one from a local deli barrel, you can feel the difference instantly. The deli pickle bites back. It smells alive. Its brine clouds and darkens with every passing day. The Vlasic spear stays perfect, unchanging, sealed, silent. That silence is what tells the truth. Nothing's moving inside. Nothing's growing. The jar looks alive, but it isn't. Vlasic didn't just preserve cucumbers. It preserved an idea that factory precision can replace the slow craft of fermentation. For many, that's progress. For some, it's loss. And once you notice that too bright green sitting under the grocery lights, you can't unsee it. It's not the color of patience. It's the color of control. Claussen. We've all believed that if it sits in the cold aisle, it must be clean. The chill feels honest, almost protective. It whispers safety. But that trust is exactly what big food companies rely on. Claussen built its empire on that promise. The jar looks simple: glass brine, fresh cucumbers. It says refrigerated for freshness, a phrase that instantly wins hearts. Because who doesn't want fresh? Who doesn't trust something that needs to stay cold? Yet beneath that cool exterior lies a chemistry set, the kind you can't see and most never question. Inside each jar sits sodium benzoate and polysorbate 80. Both are FDA approved, widely used, and considered safe in small amounts. But the key word here is small. Pickles are a comfort food, a daily side for many households. And comfort often turns into habit. Over time, those small amounts start to add up. Experts from the National Library of Medicine note that sodium benzoate can react with vitamin C in acidic conditions, like those found in your stomach, to form benzene, a known carcinogen in high doses. That's not a reason for panic, but it's not nothing either. Long-term cell studies published in Food and Chemical Toxicology show that consistent exposure to sodium benzoate may lead to oxidative stress, meaning your body's cells begin to struggle against low-level irritation day after day. It's not about one bite, it's about a slow, invisible wear. Then there's polysorbate 80, the compound that keeps the brine looking smooth and the color consistent. It's an emulsifier, basically a chemical bridge that helps oil and water stay mixed. The same additive is found in ice cream sauces and even vaccines. But when taken constantly through food research from Food and Chemical Toxicology, 2016 and Environmental Health Perspectives found it may disturb the gut microbiome, making the intestinal wall slightly more permeable over time. Dr. Walter Crinian described it this way: "These aren't poisons. They're small irritants that nudge the system out of balance." Another expert, Dr. Mark Hyman, calls it death by 1,000 bites, low doses of chemical burden that accumulate faster than we notice. For older adults, the impact grows sharper. The body's enzyme systems slow down. Digestion takes longer. What used to pass harmlessly now lingers, and the constant intake of synthetic preservatives can make inflammation harder to control. You might not link that stiffness in the morning or that new sensitivity to salty food with something as innocent as a jar of pickles. But the body keeps score quietly. That's what makes Claussen's image so clever. The cold glass, the clean brine, the promise of deli-style freshness, all those cues disarm us. They tell us we're buying something pure, when in truth refrigeration is just another form of marketing. The product isn't fresh because it's cold so it feels fresh. The real freshness, the kind born from natural fermentation, doesn't need chemistry to survive. It simply lives. Next time you pull a chilled jar from the grocery shelf, take a closer look. The fog on the glass might not be life, it might be illusion. Claussen didn't deceive anyone with lies. It did something smarter. It learned that belief is stronger than taste. 3 Best Maid? A man walks out of a grocery store holding a jar of Best Maid pickles. He smiles, proud of the deal. He got 2 jars for 1 price. The glass catches the sunlight, glowing green like bottled summer. He drops it into a shopping bag, never once wondering what he just paid for. Because who would? It's only Pickles, familiar, cheerful, always there when you need a tangy crunch beside a sandwich. The color looks fresh, the label looks trustworthy, and the brand has been around long enough to earn that faith. It's the kind of product people buy without thinking, the kind that feels safe. But if he followed that jar backward, he'd see a very different picture. The cucumbers that fill it didn't sit in barrels or ferment in salt. They passed through a factory where machines move faster than memory. They were washed, trimmed, and soaked in a chemical brine designed not for flavor but for control. In that brine, there's yellow 5, a synthetic dye that turns pale green cucumbers into the color of new grass. There's polysorbate 80, which keeps the dye evenly suspended so it won't separate. There's a lump of firming agent that keeps the pickles crunchy long after they should have softened. And there's sodium benzoate, the quiet preserver that halts any natural fermentation before it can begin. Each ingredient has a job, not in taste but in appearance. The dye makes it beautiful. The firming agent keeps it consistent. The preservative makes it last forever. Together, they tell the story of a pickle that never truly ages. The company doesn't hide this. It doesn't have to. People don't read small print when the color already convinces them. The bright green jar on the shelf says everything they want to hear: fresh, fun, family-owned, harmless. That illusion is more powerful than any slogan. Inside the factory, the system runs like a choreography. Conveyor belts roll under fluorescent lights, rows of glass jars spinning toward nozzles that pump in liquid like clockwork. Workers wear white coats, not aprons. Every batch is tested for color balance, not for taste. If a jar looks cloudy, it's rejected. If the color fades too quickly, it's reformulated. Appearance is quality now. Why do they do it? Because it works. Bright sells faster than dull. Shelf stable means fewer returns. Color uniformity earns customer trust. In the modern food industry, chemistry is efficiency and efficiency is profit. The less time spent waiting for natural fermentation. The more jars reach the shelf, the better the numbers look. But the man at the checkout doesn't see any of that. He sees nostalgia. He sees family cookouts, laughter, something simple and American. He believes that bright color means freshness, and the company knows it. They're not selling food. They're selling comfort in a jar. Weeks later, that same man opens the jar at dinner. The crunch sounds perfect. The taste feels sharp, but hollow. It does its job. It fills a space, reminds him of old summers, and then fades. What lingers isn't flavor, but a question he can't name. Somewhere in that faint aftertaste is a trace of what's been traded: time for control, care for color, craft for convenience. And once you see that trade clearly, you start wondering what else we've learned to mistake for fresh. 4. Maid olive. A sigh slips out from a lifelong pickle fan. The crunch is still there, the shine is still there, but somehow the soul is gone. That's what people keep saying about Mount Olive's bread and butter pickles, the bright golden one sitting proudly on almost every grocery shelf. The label is cheerful, the lid a familiar yellow, and the price usually lower than the rest. A family-sized jar costs less than a cup of coffee, and you get enough slices to last a month. It looks like a good deal, honest, generous, dependable. And maybe that's what keeps people buying it. Online fans who grew up with this brand say the same thing. Too sweet now. Tastes like candy. Where's the sour kick? Some even joke that the pickles could pass for dessert. It's not nostalgia talking. The recipe really changed. The company leaned into sugar, more high fructose corn syrup, less salt, and just enough vinegar to call it tangy. The goal was to please everyone, and in doing so, it pleased no one for long. Mint olive didn't start out this way. It was once a small North Carolina cannery built around local harvests. Back then, every jar was slightly different. Some were sharper, some milder, all alive with that natural fermented scent. But as demand grew, so did the need for sameness. Sweetness became the shortcut. Sugar hides flaws, softens acid, and keeps flavors predictable. It's cheaper than time and far easier to scale. Inside the factory today, the process is almost silent. Big stainless steel tanks hold syrupy brine mixed with vinegar powder. Machines pump it through hoses into glass jars stacked by the thousands. Workers test color and seal, not flavor. The result is reliable, sweet, bright, and shelf-ready for a year or more. And yet that reliability is exactly what steals the magic. Real pickles are alive. They smell of garlic, dill, and faint fermentation. The brine clouds with each passing day. You can taste the layers, a slow sting, a salt bloom, a deep finish. Mint Olive's version gives you one instant jolt of sugar acid, then nothing. It feels polished but empty. To be honest, I used to eat this one too. I liked the convenience, the neat slices, the balance that never changed. But after a while, I started tasting what people online complained about, that dull sweetness that clings to the tongue, that missing edge that once made pickles worth craving. It's not a bad product, it's just a tired one. A jar that forgot how to surprise you. And maybe that's the story here. Mint Olive didn't ruin the pickle. It perfected it until it became something else, a snack designed to comfort, not to awaken. We got used to that calm sweetness because it's easy, safe, and always there. But real flavor, the kind born from salt, time, and living brine, was never supposed to be safe. It was supposed to make you flinch a little, then smile. Sometimes I still see those golden jars at the store and feel that small tug of habit. Then I remember that taste pleasant but hollow and walk past, because sweetness replaced the sour honesty of time. And if a jar this friendly could lose its truth so quietly, it makes you wonder what else has been changed in the name of convenience. That answer might sit just one shelf away in the next jar, where the label promises fresh, but the process tells another story. 5 Wahlburgers. You'd think a jar carrying a celebrity name would care more about what's inside, but fame doesn't ferment flavor. When Wahlburgers released their line of pickles, fans rushed to try them. The label was bright, clean, familiar, that green logo, that famous name, that family story everyone knew from TV. It felt like something real, a homemade touch from people who built a restaurant with pride and sweat. And for a moment it worked. People bought the jar not just for what it was, but for what it meant. They trusted the face, the brand, the promise that it was premium. In their minds, this wasn't mass market food. It was a connection. Something you could trust because you recognized the smile behind it. But the truth is simpler. Wahlburgers pickles are made the same way as most supermarket brands by contract manufacturers who supply dozens of private labels. The cucumbers come from bulk farms, the brine from standard vinegar concentrate. Flavor comes from pre-mixed seasoning and stabilizers, not from fermentation or craft. The goal isn't taste evolution, it's taste repetition. The process has nothing to do with the kitchen. It's about efficiency, scale, and market reach. One factory might produce several brands a day, switching labels more often than ingredients. The same tanks that fill a family-owned jar at noon might be filling a budget jar by night. It's all about identity, not difference. Still, the branding works. Because in America, story sells better than salt. Consumers like knowing who stands behind what they eat. The word family on a label feels warm. The idea of celebrity gives comfort. If someone successful eats this, it must be good. Wahlburgers didn't have to change the recipe, they just had to change how it felt. And that's the quiet trick of modern food. Emotion has replaced flavor. Labels tell stories of hometown pride, brotherhood, and authenticity, but the jars underneath taste identical. The illusion isn't in what's added, it's in what's believed. Some early buyers left reviews online. Love the brand, but these pickles taste generic. Expected more flavor, kind of flat. Looks great on the counter, not much inside. It's the kind of disappointment that doesn't spark outrage, just a slow fade of trust. I remember picking one up once too. I liked the label, the clean design, the idea of something proudly American. But the moment I opened it, I knew the smell was the same as every other store-bought jar. The taste was polite, safe, completely ordinary. It didn't offend, but it didn't speak either. It was the kind of flavor that disappears before you swallow. That's what happens when marketing becomes the main ingredient. You end up buying not for the taste, but for the comfort of a story that costs more than the food itself. Fame becomes a shortcut for trust. And once trust is packaged, it doesn't have to be earned anymore. Wahlburgers didn't set out to fool anyone. They did what every brand in the aisle eventually does, turn reputation into product. But somewhere between the TV screen and the factory line, the meaning of homemade got rewritten. In the end, the jar looks perfect, the label shines, and the story sells. But when you open it, you realize the only real thing here was your belief. Fame can sell flavor, but it can't create it. And maybe that's the right place to pause before we move from illusion to honesty, from names that sell to makers that still care. 6 Bubbies? Then finally a jar that smells alive. After all the glossy labels and perfect colors, this one looks different. The glass is a little foggy, the liquid cloudy, the pickles uneven. It doesn't shout for attention. It just sits there quietly like something that has nothing to prove. And that's the first sign you're close to the real thing. Bubbies pickles don't start in a chemistry lab. They start in salt and patience. The company still uses natural fermentation, the same slow-living process that once defined every homemade pickle. The ingredients are simple cucumbers, filtered water, sea salt, garlic, and spices. No vinegar, no artificial color, no preservatives. The sour taste doesn't come from acid added later, it comes from life itself. Inside each jar, tiny lactic acid bacteria do their quiet work, transforming sugar into tang. They create gas bubbles and that cloudy brine many people mistake for spoilage. But that cloud is the sign of a living jar, proof that something real is happening inside. When you open it, the difference hits you instantly. The smell is sharp and full, not sweet, not perfumed. The crunch isn't hard or forced. It bends first, then snaps with a soft bite. The taste has layers: salt, garlic, dill, then a deep, slow sour that lingers. Every jar is a little different because every batch ferments at its own pace. There's no formula, no perfect every time. And that's exactly why it feels right. You can almost feel the patience behind it. Each cucumber sits in its brine for weeks, not hours. The salt pulls moisture, the bacteria take over the jar, changes with time. No bright dye, no quick acid, no attempt to hide the messiness of nature. What you see is what you taste, and what you taste is something that still breathes. People who once gave up on supermarket pickles often find their way back through Bubbies. Online, they write things like, "Finally real sour again," or "Tastes like my grandma's." Some even mention that they had to relearn what a real pickle looks like, that cloudy liquid, the uneven skin, the small bubbles rising from the bottom. It's not polished, but it's alive. Bubbies didn't invent anything new. They just refused to forget. While other companies chase perfection, they stayed with the small imperfections that make flavor grow. That's what makes the brand stand out, not packaging, not slogans, just honesty. You can feel it in every bite. One woman online wrote, "I hesitated before opening it. It looked spoiled, but the smell told me otherwise." That's how real food often works. It doesn't promise safety through shine, it earns trust through truth. To me, Bubbies is more than a jar of pickles. It's a small reminder that food doesn't need a face, a story, or a celebrity name to mean something. It just needs to be real, made with care, given time, allowed to live its natural life. After all the bright jars and sweet shortcuts, this one feels like breathing again. No gloss, no tricks, just the honest sting of salt and time. This isn't nostalgia, it's proof that food can still remember how to live. 7 Grillo's Pickles. There's something reassuring about a jar that doesn't try too hard. Grillo's Pickles sit in the fridge section like they belong there, simple, clear, unbothered. The cucumbers are green, the garlic, real, the dill floating naturally in the brine. You can see everything. Nothing is hidden, nothing exaggerated. And maybe that's why it feels trustworthy before you even taste it. The story began in Boston in 2008. Travis Grillo was 20-something broke and carrying his grandfather's pickle recipe. He built a small wooden cart, filled a few jars with cucumbers, salt, vinegar, dill, and garlic, then stood on a city corner hoping someone would stop. People did, not because of a brand name, but because of the flavor. That clean, sharp tang made with nothing but time and care. 15 years later, Grillo's is in supermarkets across the country. But the process hasn't been rewritten for profit. The pickles are still made fresh daily and kept cold from factory to shelf. There's no pasteurization, no preservatives, no food coloring. The company accepts that real food doesn't last forever. Instead of forcing time to freeze, they let it flow naturally. If you read the label, it's almost comforting: cucumbers, water, salt, vinegar, garlic, dill, grape leaves. That's it. Ingredients you could find in any kitchen, listed without tricks or chemical names. The brine is clear because there's nothing to hide. The taste is sharp, but balanced: salt first, then garlic, then that living bite that wakes you up. It doesn't stick to your tongue like syrup. It fades cleanly, leaving freshness instead of fatigue. And every batch tastes a little different because Grillo's doesn't chase perfect sameness. The company keeps flavor alive by allowing it to vary the way homemade food always did. People who try it often sound relieved. This tastes like real pickles again. Finally, something crunchy that isn't full of sugar. My kids actually ask for these in their lunchbox. Those reviews don't read like marketing. They sound like gratitude. In an industry that talks endlessly about heritage and tradition, Grillo's just practices it. They didn't need a celebrity face or nostalgic commercial. Their honesty became their advertisement. The clear plastic jar itself is a statement: what you see is what you get. And what you get is the rarest flavor left in food today: transparency. Workers sign the tops of each batch. Sometimes you'll even find a short thank you note scrawled in marker. It's a small thing, but it restores something that's been missing: connection. You remember there's still a person somewhere behind what you eat. Grillo's could have grown faster by cutting corners. They could have added preservatives to stretch shelf life or colored the brine to look brighter. But they didn't. They trusted that people can still taste honesty, that we know the difference between something living and something made to last. When you open the jar, there's no perfume, no artificial punch. Just dill, garlic, and salt water doing what they've done for centuries. It smells clean. It smells alive. That's what makes this brand special: not perfection, but presence. It reminds us that freshness isn't a trick of packaging, it's a sign of care. Maybe real freshness was never about how long food lasts, but how long it stays honest. Pickles were never just about flavor. They were about time, about patience, salt, and the small miracle of something preserved with care. We've seen how that idea was stretched, sweetened, colored, and marketed until it barely resembled what it used to be. But the truth is, still on the shelf in a few jars that never forgot how to be honest. What matters now isn't fear or guilt. It's knowing the difference. Because once you can taste the gap between chemistry and craft, you can never go back. So maybe it's not about avoiding every brand, it's about recognizing which ones still carry a heartbeat. Real food doesn't need to shout, it just needs to live. And the next time you reach for a jar, let your hand pause, not out of doubt, but out of respect for what's real.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.